Hey people, welcome to the Run Tester. It's Kieran here, and in this video we're going to be talking again about the Saucony Endorphin Speed 3. It's a hugely popular shoe. I have run a lot of miles in it, and in this video I wanted to give you the ultimate durability test. Now, I put around 650 miles into this pair of shoes, running across Europe. That was over 25 days as part of my run all the way along the river. It was a 1,830 mile run. I ran in the Speed 3 for 650 of those miles in 25 days. Across a range of terrains, lots of kind of really hard tarmac, through some really sort of serious temperatures, a little bit of off-road trailing as well. So this is almost like the ultimate durability test. I wanted to show you exactly how these shoes have held up and talk a little bit about their strengths and weaknesses when it comes to the overall durability. So this is the Saucony Endorphin Speed 650 mile durability test. Now, if you want to get really familiar with the Saucony Endorphin Speed 3, the best thing to do is to hit the link here to see our full review of the Speed 3. Go and watch that now. That'll give you all the really deep details about this shoe. But in the meantime, here's some very quick kind of top line details about the specs, the weight, the drop, all of those things in a nutshell. Start with the price then. Well, the Speed 3 are going to come in at £165 in the UK or $170. The stack height, 36 mils in the heel and 28 mils in the forefoot, and that's a drop of 8 millimeters. In terms of weight, they weigh 8.1 ounces or 229 grams. Now, looking at the key features of the shoe, you've got Power Run PB foam midsole, you've got a slightly wider forefoot base and an S-curve winged nylon plate. Both of these have been tweaked from the Speed 2 to add a little bit of extra stability. You've got a fairly dense but quite breathable kind of mesh upper. Flip them over on the outsole and you've got some XT900 rubber in kind of some strategic places to add a little bit of extra grip and a little bit of extra protection for that midsole foam. So in terms of this durability test then, as I said, I ran well in excess of kind of 650 miles in these shoes. I ran on a real kind of mix of terrains, everything from sort of really heavy, I guess sort of motorway, dual carriageway type kind of gritty sort of tarmac roads, right down to river paths that are essentially kind of stony and gravelly, a little bit kind of off-road. I did this in temperatures that range from 25 degrees Celsius right up to 40 degrees Celsius, so they had to cope with quite a lot of heat as well. Mainly running sort of fairly slow paces, not anything kind of too fast, but I was also carrying about 10 to 12 kilos on my pack. I think I was about sort of 78 kilos in that, so you're talking about 90 kilos going through these shoes and that midsole as well during that sort of day in, day out. The other thing that's worth noting is I didn't have any other shoes to wear, so outside of those runs that were kind of 6-7 hours a day, I was also having to wear them to walk around, so there's extra mileage and extra wear and tear that went into these shoes. They basically were the only shoes I had, didn't come off my feet for, you know, maybe sort of 12 hours a day. So they've taken an awful lot of wear and tear through those 25 days. So that, all things considered, is a pretty intense test for a set of shoes when you consider that most kind of brands would recommend, most experts would recommend that you actually kind of rotate your shoes to give those midsole elements a sort of chance to kind of relax and reform without putting them kind of day-to-day back runs. So I've given them the ultimate test, and here's what I found. So first up, let's talk about the all-important ride. And I think the one thing that really surprised me is that these shoes ran almost the same from day one, from mile 1 right through to mile 650. In terms of that overall ride, the comfort, the feel underfoot, the response from the midsole, the kind of that speed roll, kind of roll technology, these ran like a dream actually. They were absolutely perfect for what I needed them to do. My paces ranged from sort of 12-minute miles right down to 8.5-minute miles, again carrying a lot of kind of kilos on my back. But there was excellent consistency from these throughout those miles. I really expected there to be quite a lot of degradation kind of early on, you know, after maybe 300 or 400 miles. But even into those upper miles, they did really well. The midsole didn't really lose any of its spring. So yeah, in terms of the ride, really happy with the way that they performed. So we talk a little bit more specifically about the midsole unit and how that coped. I mean, you can kind of see it doesn't really look any different, to be honest. I mean, it's obviously dirty and filthy. It absolutely stinks. These shoes are so smelly. It's hard to do this video whilst I'm talking to you. But you know, yeah, there's some sort of crinkling and there's little bits, but there's nothing there that looks like a sort of it's overly compressed in terms of that midsole foam. They have kind of held up really, really nicely, really well. And I think for 90% of the miles that I ran in them, the midsole performed really, really strongly. And I'd say for 90% of the miles that I ran, I didn't see any degradation in that Power Run PB foam. And I certainly didn't notice any more impact coming up through the shoe from the ground. What I did notice that was about 3 to 4 days before I decided to swap these shoes out for another pair of Speed 3s was that I started to get a little bit of a burning sensation in my plantar. So it felt like my foot was being a little bit stretched, that maybe some of the arch support out of these shoes had gone. And I'm not really sure why that is. The actual kind of insoles feel fine. I can't feel too much of a collapse in the midsole foam here. And the only thing that I kind of thought was perhaps that nylon plate had sort of buckled or stopped working or had collapsed, and that was the one thing that I put it down to. It felt like it was, you know, there just wasn't quite so much support under the arch right towards the end of those miles that I put in, and that is why I swapped it out. But that is the only thing that really caused a problem. And again, that was kind of, I probably was up to sort of 600 miles in them before that happened. And as soon as I put on the new pair of Speed 3s, that sensation in my foot disappeared. So I put it down to the shoes rather than an injury or something that happened on the run. Now moving on to the uppers, and this is an area where I think the Speed 3 have performed impeccably well. I'm really impressed with these. These uppers are almost still in kind of perfect condition. I mean, if they were clean, you wouldn't really notice any difference. There's no kind of holes where the toes poke up. Sometimes my little toe will rise up and you can see a bit of wear and tear on the edges where that goes through. There's no rips, no tears. There's just very little signs of wear at all. And even one thing, you know, when you're going to do these big miles in shoes, often somewhere that goes is sort of up here around the heel collar. In a lot of shoes that happens. It's just where you've got rubbing it. It's quite a difficult thing for the shoe manufacturers, I think, to avoid. There's absolutely zero damage to this. It's still pretty much in perfect condition. It hasn't worn through. There's no sign of the kind of back plastic sort of plates coming through. The heel collar's still in great, you know, intact. The tongues are still sort of as they were when I first put them on. I mean, this upper performance has been brilliant for 650 miles. That's I think really to be commended. And you can see, you know, there's absolutely no separation here. You know, no sign of the uppers coming away from the midsoles. These things are still kind of locked rigid. There's you know, really, really robust. Now, where things get a little bit more interesting, perhaps in terms of the overall durability and a little bit more testing, is when you look at the outsole. Now, something I know that a lot of people mentioned about the Speed 2 was that the outsole didn't have enough kind of protective rubber, and people saw a lot of wear and tear on the Speed 2. I don't think the Speed 3 have necessarily fixed that problem. You can see here that, you know, there is a lot of wear and tear in some key areas where my kind of heels have been striking here, and you're missing a bit of protection. That exposed midsole foam has taken quite, you know, I mean, a reasonable amount of damage. It's not crazy. I mean, you'd expect some from sort of 650 miles, and particularly some of the terrain I was running on was quite sort of cut up, sort of stony paths, and I would expect to see some of that. If you look here, I mean, you can see there that it has started to eat away at this kind of back section of the midsole foam. That's clearly where the way that I'm running and where I'm landing. It could have done perhaps with a little bit more outsole rubber here to add a little bit more protection. There's other points, you know, I think the overall kind of the grip in certain places is definitely smoothed off in key kind of contact points. And overall, you can see sort of in the heel back here, you can see it on the kind of toes, certainly here in the kind of sort of the toe sort of forefoot area where I've been landing and striking, that's worn away. But I don't think overall that you would, you know, this is more than you would expect for the mileage that I put in. And actually, a lot of this stuff probably happened sort of later into those sort of 650 miles rather than earlier. So, you know, again, I'm sort of pretty impressed. I was running in sort of dry conditions, so even though that grip's worn away, I didn't feel any sort of problems in terms of grip. I'm not moving fast and particularly kind of speedy round corners, so you know, it's, you know, for grip, I wasn't putting it through particularly challenging kind of tests on that front. But you know, even where this has worn down, this shoe still ran perfectly fine despite that wear and tear that was on there. So I think you're easily going to get, you know, a good kind of high volume of miles out of this shoe. I think the other thing that's worth noting that on the run and after the run, I walked quite a lot of miles in these shoes, and I think, you know, to a certain extent that tends to rock you back onto your heels a bit more. So I'm not surprised to see a bit more wear and tear in the heel than you might do if you were just purely running in these shoes and you were a bit more of a kind of mid to forefoot striker than a heel striker. So the verdict then on the durability of the Speed 3, I don't think I can fault these shoes. They handled pretty much everything that I threw at them in that 650 miles. And aside from that loss of arch support after kind of 500, 550 miles, I think everything else held up really well to some really, really intense testing. And I think overall, in terms of durability, these shoes represent really good value for money. Significant heel strikers may feel like they want a little bit more protection for that midsole with the outsole rubber in the heel, and that's something maybe that Saucony will work on for the next version of these shoes. It would sort of certainly kind of tick off that kind of final bit of durability that may be sort of slightly lacking there. But overall, what I think you're getting here is a shoe that's going to run well from mile 1 right up into the kind of, I put it through into sort of 500 miles plus. And I think in terms of durability, you've got something that's as good as any shoe that's out there on the shelves right now. So there you have it. That has been my 650 mile durability test of the Saucony Endorphin Speed 3. Hope you've enjoyed it. If you have any questions about the shoe, hit us up in the comments below. We'd also love to hear if you've had the Speed 3, any durability issues with them, or what your thoughts are on those shoes as compared to other shoes. Also pop those in the comments below. We're always interested to see what other people's experiences are. Don't forget to like and subscribe for other videos that are coming up on the channel soon. We hope you've enjoyed the video, and we hope to see you again soon on the Run Testers. Thank you very much for watching.